Good evening. We're live here in Canterbury at the University of Kent for a brand new student-run political debate show on KTV. This is The Third Degree.
Tonight, in the run-up to May's general election, we bring together representatives from the 5 main parties of the United Kingdom to debate on topical issues that affect you.
Joining us on the panel this evening are Stuart Jeffery, the chair of the Kent Green Party and prospective parliamentary candidate for the Green Party in Canterbury and Whitstable, Jim Gascoyne, Ukip chairman of the Canterbury branch and prospective parliamentary candidate for Ukip in Canterbury and Whitstable, Rachel Goodwin, prospective Labour City Councillor candidate for Canterbury in May and trade union rep for USDAW, Terry Jackson, a student at the University of Kent and a Liberal, Councillor Jeremy Bellemy, Conservative councillor for Barton Ward Canterbury, and finally, Aodhan Gregory, master's student at the University of Kent and a freelance journalist.
I'm Andreas Payne.
And I'm Petra Clews. With us tonight is a small audience who will be given the chance to have their input on the topics throughout our debate. Our first topic tonight is education. And the question is, universities are facing the accusation that they are pricing students out of postgraduate education. Prices for home students in 2014-15 have risen by 8.2% compared to 2012. And this follows on from the government's restriction on the new postgraduate loans of £10,000 being offered to only those under 30. Is it fair that those are struggling to access a university education? We'll go straight to Stuart Jeffery.
Thank you. I mean, for me, education should be free, whether it's postgrad or undergrad. I think the policies introduced by Labour 10 years ago to start charging students and the Lib Dem and Tories to, frankly, bankrupt students are absolutely despicable. And I think that simply applies to postgraduate study as well. Postgraduate study is obviously clearly much smaller. There is no reason it shouldn't be funded by the government. And I think, you know, we've got to get over this idea that education is simply for the rich, and we need to start ensuring that education is for the people that need it.
There. I'd just like to hear from Jeremy, please.
Yeah, in terms of the postgraduate study, obviously from the autumn statement last week, the Chancellor announced some help for postgraduate students, as you've already mentioned, and the fact that it's applicable to only to under 30s, I would suggest by the time you get to 30, perhaps if you're going back into education, you're far more likely to be able to be in a financially stable position yourself, to fund it yourself in a way that a younger person might not, who won't have had time to work in the meantime. So generally, I think that though you say, Stuart, about the government funding it, unfortunately there isn't a magic money tree in the Downing Street garden that this money comes from. It all comes from people's taxes, and obviously if you're saying that we're going to pay for it from the government, that means ramping up taxes for people who are already struggling, so I don't think that's fair either.
But you're not taxing the Starbucks, the Amazons, and even today's Osborne's Soppert taxing them is quite a pathetic one. You know, they're avoiding taxes of over £100 billion according to the TUC. You know, you haven't taken any grip on this.
Aodhan, you're a master's student. Do you have anything to say on this?
Really, I think this sort of system is outdated. It doesn't work. 45p out of every pound is only ever paid back to the system in terms of the loan system, and I think it's really broken. We have free education in Germany, France, Scotland, and Ireland. So why can't we have it here? It's working there through the tax system, and yes, we're just burdening more and more people with debt through the current British system.
Jim, would you like to add anything to this?
Yes, certainly I'd like to. We're working with a broken system here. a system that's completely unsustainable. It's unsustainable for students who can't cope with the substantial debt that they're accumulating while they're students, and it's unsustainable from the country's point of view. We need to change the system. We need to decide what education is all about, tertiary education is all about. We need to focus on the fact that the country, for the benefit of the economy, needs to see people doing courses which are going to support their future careers.
Terry, as a current student, was there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I would say I believe in that education should be free and access to education should be easier for everyone to get into it. But there's a difference between France, Germans and other countries in Europe in terms of education with the United Kingdoms. The United Kingdom is one of the countries where you go if you have a degree and the degree is more valuable, and it helps the United Kingdom's government to build economics in terms of educations. In another side, it means we can make educations easier for people to get into it. However, but it shouldn't really be free in terms of like when you reach to higher education in terms of like university, because not everyone wants to get into university. But like lower education like primary school, secondary school, NVQ should be free, but not really university, because not everyone wants to get into university.
Everyone can get into
Sorry,
university.
we just need to hear from Rachel quickly before we carry on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an ex-student of the University of Kent and I studied down at Canterbury College. I did the HND route. I could not have afforded to have gone if it wasn't for the loans available to me and the grants available, and that was when the fees were less than £3,000. I'd have no chance now to afford it at £9,000. I think it's an extortionate amount. And they say they're not offering it to people over 30, and Jeremy stated that people over 30 had a chance to get a job and earn some money. All well and good, but when you're on 0-hour contracts, part-time contracts, you just can't afford it. I'm coming up to 30 in a year and a half, and I can't even afford to do a PGCE or follow-on like that because of the cost.
Aodhan, I believe you had a point you wanted to add.
I think that's a ridiculous statement that Terry has made over there, the fact that not everyone wants to go to university. That may be so, the case, but the fact is not everyone can go to university in the current system, and that's what really needs to be addressed.
Rachel, you started to speak before then. So.
Yeah, no, I was basically just saying that when the Lib Dems come into their manifesto at the last election, they said they was going to get rid of student fees, and obviously that would have increased their student vote. However, with the Conservatives, they actually trebled this to about £9,000. How does this kind of work going forward?
A lot of people just focus on the fact that the fees raise up to £9,000, but you have to look at it the way people paying it back as well. You pay £9,000, but you're not paying it back until you get a job, which is you earning like more than 21,000 grand a year. It's not like when you finish your degree, then you start paying that £9,000 straight away, which is I recognize that £9,000 is a lot for people to start paying it back. But I'm going to the statement that it just made just now. Educations, we have to start from the lower, which is like the primary school, secondary school, and we go into university. We can't just think about students in university, but we have to think about students from primary school and secondary school, how they're thinking how to get to university.
If we could go to Stuart Jeffery, I believe there was a protest that you actually supported on campus. And then straight after that, we'll go over to Ukip. Okay, Jim?
Good.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the protest today against student fees and against the austerity imposed on students, but also against the actions of the police over in it was Warwick, wasn't it? Where students doing a similar protest were CS gassed. So, there is this almost assault on students and younger people by the coalition parties. And I think, I'm really pleased that students here stood up for their rights, frankly.
Thank you, Jim. You wanted to add something?
Yes, indeed, I do. First of all, UKIP policy is that we should abandon this ambition that 50% of young people should attend a university. Why would such a large number even want to attend a university? UKIP policy also is that fees should be waived for people taking courses in maths, in engineering, in medicine, in technology, these kind of courses, which will lead to productive employment in the future. So it's a great investment on the part of the country to invest in people doing those sort of courses.
And if we could just hear from Jeremy again, please.
Yeah, it was mentioned earlier on regarding sort of the burden of student debt, and I attended my undergraduate course. I finished in 2012, and I think I went in just before the tuition fees went up, but nevertheless I accumulated about £25,000 worth of student loans at that time. And I think there is a valid argument to say that the current system isn't perfect, because when people say that they don't want to go to university because the fees are £9,000, the problem is that the student loans are essentially on the never-never, in that a lot of people will never actually pay them back, and that is the problem with the system. So people say that they're put off from going to university by the debt, but to be honest, I don't even think about the debt. I know it exists, but to be honest, it isn't even though I know it is a real debt, I don't consider it to be such, because of the way the system's set up. It's not like a bank loan where they're going to come round and repossess your house, because it is set up in the way that Terry suggested, whereby it's when you earn over a certain amount and it just vanishes from my wages automatically. So I think that the system does need fixing in that sense. Obviously, the postgraduates is something that I don't have any experience of, and I appreciate that Aodhan is far more knowledgeable in this area than myself, because I've not actually ever studied as a postgraduate. But yeah, I don't agree that the university education should be free, because like Terry, I don't think that everyone particularly wants to, and I don't think that everyone should have to pay for those that do. At the same time, I do accept that the current system isn't perfect and that there is definitely room for improvement.
If we could just hand back to the audience member who brought this up, is there anything further you'd like to add to that?
Yes. So was anyone actually going to answer the two questions that I asked? Initially, obviously, the gentleman from the Conservative Party, I wanted to ask whether or not ageism was allowed in education. And secondly, other than Terry, I wanted to know how everyone felt about Ofsted's report today, where 1 in 3 secondary schools was failing everybody. And I just also want to ask that I think the issue with the £9,000 a year, I tend to do some ambassador work where I go out to schools, and it's the children from deprived areas that struggle with that large sum of number when they know they won't have any parental support when they get to university. Everything they will have to provide themselves. So there is an issue that it is a lot of money when there is no family support.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but I do think there has to be a cut-off point. You can't expect to just go and basically, finish one degree and spend the rest of your life doing degree after degree after degree. I think there does have to be a cut-off point, and I don't think it can be an indefinite thing. Regarding your last point, very quickly, regarding the sort of people from less well-off backgrounds, I myself am the first member of my family to ever been to university. Both my parents were in manual jobs. I worked at Pizza Hut and McDonald's all hours of the day and night when I was at university, so I know exactly what that's like.
And why is it that you feel that people can't stay in education?
Well, I just don't think it's fair on the taxpayers who are working and paying their taxes if someone's just going to stay in university forever and don't actually intend to get a job. I know that's not what the gentleman's implying, but what I'm saying is that there does have to be a cut-off point somewhere, and it's where you draw the line, which is really the point of debate. And I think that you can't justify staying in education forever is basically...
Aodhan, I see you shaking your head.
I think that's a ridiculous notion to suggest that people would stay in education just to avoid getting a job. The reason why they're going back into education and back into a postgraduate degree is basically because they can't get a job with an undergraduate degree.
Our next question for the panel is, the Office of National Statistics has reported that 1.4 billion people in the UK work on 0 hours contracts. This form of employment is controversial and raises questions on financial security. Do you believe that these contracts are good for the market on the whole and should remain as they are? And first up tonight, we are going to go for Terry.
I think the government should create more, should invest, because if we want to build strong economics, we can't just go into cuttings benefits. We have to invest. By investing more, we will have a lot of revenues in terms of business and things, and financial powers in terms of helping Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, so local people can build economic growth instead of being concentrated in England. That's, I think, my point of view.
Jim, you've been a business owner and run businesses before. What do you think about 0 hours contracts?
Well, there are certainly a lot of them about. It makes life very easy for employers to pick people up and put them down at no notice, which is really what this is all about. And that's unsustainable from the employee's point of view. How can anybody possibly manage their lives? How can they possibly go to a lender of money to obtain a mortgage or finance some other need and offer as some sort of security, what? Nothing. 0 hours means 0 hours potentially. So it's an unsustainable model in the economy that we live in. And
Rachel, do you have anything you'd like to add here?
Yeah, coming from a retail background, I know many different people that actually are on 0 hour contracts. These aren't good for them. The problem you face is exactly as Jim mentioned, that they can't get mortgages, they can't afford anything like that. They're also tied into a contract with companies where they're told you can't actually look for jobs elsewhere. I mean, how can you get by on 1 hour a week, 0 hours a week? You cannot do it, it's impossible. The other problem with it is 1.4 billion. It makes the figures for the condemned government look really, really good, that unemployment is down, when actually low employment is up. It doesn't solve the economy. I myself, I don't earn enough money to pay tax. How is this ever going to help bring the deficit down with the government if a lot of people on 0 hour contracts are not actually paying tax, and that can't be good for the economy or the recovery itself.
Sorry, just to clarify, there was a slight error on my part. There was actually 1.4 million people, not billion people.
Sorry.
That's my mistake. Apologies. Yeah, very busy otherwise over here in the UK. Sort of following on from Rachel, Jeremy, your opinion on this?
Yeah, I would say to start off that perhaps Rachel could talk to the over 60 Labour MPs who hire staff on 0 hour contracts themselves when their national policy is to ban them when their own MPs are doing it. But yeah, I don't agree with outright banning 0 hour contracts. I think in certain circumstances where the employee actually wants that flexibility, it's fine. But in the majority of these cases where people don't want it, and it's basically they're in a 0 hour contract because that's all they can get, obviously that does present the problem. And as Terry has suggested, obviously in the long term what we want to see is more growth, more people creating jobs that people can get into permanent, proper jobs with set hours and not have to live in limbo as many of them are doing now. So I think that it is intensely regrettable that so many people are in these 0 hour contracts. I'm the first to admit that I'm not an economics expert, and obviously whatever the government can do to decrease the number and get people into proper full-time jobs, the better.
If we could just go over to the audience, if we can go straight back to Francis, who actually posed this question to start with.
I don't know if you are aware, there is a TUC initiative starting on the 15th, running to the 21st, called Decent Jobs Week, where basically nationally there is protests going on to highlight the 1.4 million people that are on 0 hour contracts. Also in the southeast there's 1 million people doing unpaid overtime. The minimum wage is a ridiculous amount, and when it's so far below the living wage, even at our own university, the Kent Union will not support the living wage for its own staff in the shops. And I just want to know what the panellists feel about all these issues and whether or not they do support the TUC.
Before we hear from Aodhan on the panel, anyone else in the audience wish to pose a question or chip into this debate on 0 hours contracts?
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
The lady there.
I'm no economist either, but I do know, as I used to have small businesses, and I do know that it was very difficult to keep on our wages. At one point we employed 35 people in 4 different sites, but we had the kind of business which needed staff there all the time, but if they weren't, it was really, really difficult to find someone else to fill their position. If someone was sick, we had to pay them sick pay, or 6 months we had to keep their job open. I can see why small businesses, my point is I can see why small businesses are resorting to 0 hour contracts to keep themselves alive, because it's so difficult out there. As a small business, I don't think they're supported.
We're going to go back to Aodhan now. Aodhan, 0 hours contracts, your opinion?
Yeah, well, I think it's a short-term solution for a very long-term problem. As some of the delegates here have pointed out, and indeed the audience, it clearly isn't working. We're not paying enough into the system, although we have artificially floated our economy to one of the strongest in Europe. In the long-term solution, it's clearly not viable. Eventually these numbers are going to catch up with the government, they're going to catch up with the exchequer, and you've got to think that the people who are on these contracts are the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. They're the low educated, they're the low skilled, and these are the people who need us most, essentially. And I think it's a shambles, the fact that the university, this particular university, isn't paying its staff to a decent level, especially with the cost of living. It's hard enough for students. It shouldn't be as hard for the staff.
Thank you, Aodhan. If we could just hear from Stuart as well, please.
Yes, so I think the original question was, are they good for the market? Very clearly, no, they're not. And even if they were, they should be banned. We can't keep putting the market, the economy before people. We've got to put people before profit. It's very clear to me good businesses run best with happy, motivated, well, properly paid employees that feel secure in their jobs. And there's plenty of evidence to suggest that. There was a supplementary question about the living wage. I must say I'm shocked that the Kent Union don't pay that, and frankly I'm going to be writing to them. I'm really shocked about that. We need a living wage that actually reflects the true cost of living. We're campaigning for £10 an hour. We think that's reasonable, and frankly the idea that hundreds of people in Canterbury are paid less than the current living wage is frankly obscene.
Thank you. But just to remind the panel as well, at any time you can sort of jump in. If it's not appropriate at the time, we'll let you know, but feel free to jump into the debate.
Yeah, can I?
Yep, sorry, Rachel.
Yeah, I think one of the audience members mentioned, obviously, small businesses, 0-hour contracts is quite good for them. Have you maybe considered doing a casual contract instead, where they're not actually contracted? Not obviously you into yourself as in...
Sorry, one moment. If we could just get the microphone over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know actually about casual contracts. I'm not in small business anymore, but I can see why, because I was there when the first 0-hour contracts were heard of, and I could see the attraction as a small business holder to them. We had so many bills and overheads. We felt it was very much the local councils we had to pay. We had to pay everybody out. Everybody had a piece of us until actually we felt there was nothing left. So I can see why a lot of small business holders would have found that attractive. Equally, I've got a friend who works in the healthcare business, looking after the elderly, and she's on a 0-hour contract. As you say, she can have an hour or 2 hours in a week, and she has to be on call for them, and it's outrageous. Yeah. There's got to be a balance, surely.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Jim just wanted to add something.
Yes, we celebrate the fact that there are small businesses opening up all the time. But it's no good celebrating something that's unsustainable. When people are earning such incredibly small amounts of money, they need, and mostly are, then subsidised by the state, and the state is taxpayers. It's an unsustainable model that needs to be changed. As Aodhan said, it's a long-term problem. But we do need to find a way forward. We're kidding ourselves if we think that all these small enterprises, we're saying small, but some of the people who are paying 0 contracts are very large businesses, that such enterprises are sustainable. They're not. They're cheating. They're living off the taxpayer.
Thank you, Jim.
And I remind you, the taxpayer is you and me and everybody else in this room.
Thank you very
those
much,
of us
Jim.
that earn enough to pay tax.
Thank you. Rachel looked like she was about to jump in
Yeah,
after our audience member.
Basically, I didn't think I'd actually agree with you, Ukip, on a slight point.
What a pleasure, Rachel. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. When 0-hour contracts were brought in, they were brought in with good intentions, but obviously it's the bigger companies which have actually completely abused the system, and obviously we know which is the biggest one. I've friends that work there actually. I am employed on a casual contract as well as my contract where I work. This actually fits in quite handy. It fits around my job. It fits around the business that I work in. That's why I suggested to the member that it may be a route going down. And I only found out a couple of weeks ago the difference between casual contracts and 0-hour contracts. I didn't know there was much of a difference.
What is that difference, Rachel?
If I get this correct, shoot me if I'm wrong, but 0-hour contracts, you are actually contracted to that company and you have to work for that company. Casual contracts, you don't have to. They will call you up when they need you, require you, but you can look for employment elsewhere. That's what I was told anyway.
And are these good for the market as a whole, casual contracts?
Casual contracts, I feel, yes, compared to 0, because the abuse system is less likely to happen, because obviously everybody else can fit their basic job. If they've got 16 to 30 hours a week on their main job, then this one works as a top-up job. Also, the other thing that come across recently is the ruling on holiday pay being averaged out amongst those So for 0-hour contracts, your holiday pay is not going to be a lot, and people will be at a loss due to taking a holiday. But obviously, I know they're challenging that, as they're going to be challenging that. But as it stands, the ruling on holiday pay is very, very good, because it allows for people that are on these 0-hour contracts to actually get paid a little bit more when they do take a break from work.
Jeremy, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, not so much to do with 0-hour contracts, but I think the member of the audience mentioned the living wage. Certainly from my perspective as a city councillor, I'm happy to say that unlike Kent Union, that the city council does pay all of its staff the equivalent of the living wage as it is currently. And that does go for all staff in the Marlow Theatre, the museums and all the rest of it. And so obviously that's a very positive thing, and I believe that's something that we're continuing to do as we move into reviewing our pay again for the next year. On 0-hour contracts, bizarrely, I'm actually on a 0-hour contract myself at the moment, but as a sort of top-up job, as Rachel was just indicated, rather than as my main employment. And that's what I was getting at in terms of not outright banning them. That for people in my situation where it is just a top-up, it can actually be a very good thing. But obviously the problem is when you're then trapped into it for lack of other employment rather than doing it as a choice.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. I was just wondering if there was any other comment from the audience at all.
The original question was, do you support the TUC's Decent Jobs Week coming up this week? I'd just quite like to know if people think that's a good initiative or not.
Well, yes, I support it. What can I say? Yeah, I'm very, very supportive of the TUC. They do some excellent work, and very pleased that they're doing this.
And our third question tonight is based around the law. And our question is, last week, a mother was asked to place a napkin over her baby while she was breastfeeding in Claridge's. Do you believe this was fair? And I'm just going to ask who would like to start us off. Jim, certainly.
Well, it's a long time since I bottled my own children. This was a ridiculous state of affairs, wasn't it? We celebrate motherhood. All the advice is that mums should nurse their children for as long as they reasonably can for the health of the child. Over the years, societal norms have changed. Going back, we did live in a rather strange, prudish society.
But Jim, was it not Mr Farage, your party leader, who suggested that it was the right thing to do?
I think Nigel was right. Well, wait a minute, what are you saying? What was the right thing to do?
Yeah, do you think it was fair that Claridge's asked the mother to cover up whilst she was breastfeeding?
It's their business. Their business. They can ask someone on their premises to do anything. But of course, the customer can also take a view. We can all take a view. Do we want to go to Claridge's with those of our colleagues who are breastfeeding? It's a market choice, I think. The fact of the matter is society has moved on. And now breastfeeding is considered perfectly normal amongst most people. But I do acknowledge that there are a good number of people of the older generation for whom, well, frankly, it feels uncomfortable.
I'd like to hand over to Rachel as the only other female on the panel and just see how she feels about this, whether she agrees.
I think it was absolutely disgraceful, to be honest. There's a lot of women out there that will breastfeed, and I mean, think of the women themselves. Do they not feel embarrassed? Would they not feel embarrassed having to, you know, breastfeed a baby in public? If that baby needs feeding, I'm sorry, but the baby should be fed. And I don't think any businesses, I mean, yes, I understand where you're coming from, that yes, it is up to the company, but then again, surely companies should be there to support the people that are actually coming into their shops. And I mean, eventually these babies are going to grow up into people and go shopping there.
Absolutely.
I mean, so why
they're going to
they
make
want
some
to put them in
choices,
judgment?
and it may be that Claridge's Hotel will suffer as a result.
And I just think Nigel Farage got it wrong. They should not cover up, because it's almost saying, well, actually, you're a woman, you're not allowed to do what nature has intended.
We still live in a society where exposing yourself as a woman is not ordinarily encouraged. But under the circumstances we're talking about, some level of modesty might appeal to the mother, for goodness sake. the mother doesn't seem to be getting asked.
So you agree? So do you agree with your
I think
party
we've got
leader?
the audience members wanting to join in, but if we
Jim,
could just
Jim, do you
go
agree
to
with your
Aodhan
party
first, and we'll be straight
Do you
with the
agree with your
audience.
party leader then that women should sort of sacrifice their civil liberties and cover up for the just to pander to other people in the carriage? Or
I'm not
in
sure
the
that
restaurant
that's
or a
what the
cafe?
situation was. We're not talking here about civil liberties. We're talking about what happened in that hotel on that occasion. And frankly, Nigel may take a view on something like this. It's a societal view. We're not talking about the law here. We're talking about social norms. It's nothing to do with the law. Nigel can take one view and I can take another, and that's one of the joys of being a member of UKIP. We're not slavish to some rule book.
Thank you very much, Jim. If we could go straight into the audience. Sorry, who had their hand up? Yes, certainly, please. Lady in the pink dress.
I'm just horrified by the fact anybody would take offence at a perfectly natural situation. And the truth is, if a woman's breastfeeding, then, you know, it's very discreet and nobody is exposing anything. I would say to Claridge's, would they prefer to have a screaming child, you know, annoying their customers? And it's better just to feed the child and deal with the situation, and everyone's calm and happy. And if a few elderly people get upset by it, then they're the people with the problem. That's what I'd like to say.
Thank you. We're going to go to Stuart, please, for your reaction.
I'm just horrified by what I've heard from Jim, and almost, sorry to say, Rachel, as well. You know, Claridge's, this isn't their business. They are not there to discriminate against people. The fact that they are discriminating against a woman who needs to feed her child is frankly appalling. Where's it going to stop? Are they going to start discriminating against black people, against gay people? I mean, we got over that 100 years, 50 years ago.
Really,
you
Stuart?
Know, come on.
Stuart, calm down. Nobody's discriminating. That's not what this is all about.
Thank you, Jim.
They
Let Stuart carry
are
on.
discriminating. They ought to be. There should be some form of sanction. There should be some form of law. We've got to get over the fact that breastfeeding is perfectly natural. It should happen wherever, whenever that baby needs feeding. And we've got to, you know, frankly, stop companies like Claridge's imposing some frankly embarrassing and discriminatory rules on women.
Thank you, Terry. Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think everything's been said. I kind of agree as well. But it's kind of a complex matter as well, because it depends how it happens and where it happens. If the woman had the opportunity to cover the baby, they could have done it as well. But if they did not have the opportunities, they don't have no choice. They're human beings, because human beings are more valuable than law anyway. So they don't have no choice. They have to feed their babies, because the baby's health is more important than any laws that we can make. So I think.
Aodhan, you look like you wanted to jump in there.
I just the first part of your statement about where you said how and where it happens, they have the choice. Yes, they do have the choice, but why should they choose to cover up? If they
No, I
choose
said
not
it
to
depends on
cover
what
up,
situations.
I still think, regardless of the situation, they shouldn't be told to cover up. They shouldn't be told to leave the establishment. I think it's well within their rights and well within. Going back to Stuart, well within women's rights to
Jeremy,
do
do you have
like.
anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, I would say that in this instance it's the mother's choice. Obviously, Rachel was saying that some women might not be comfortable. They might then choose to go into the baby changer if that's what they want to do. I don't think they should be forced to do it if they don't want to. If she's comfortable and happy to do it in public, then I don't have a problem with that. As has already been said, it's a perfectly normal, natural function. And if she wants to do it in public, then more power to her.
I just find it a non-event because I don't know what's offensive about the back of a baby's head, because that is the reality of the situation.
Got Rachel nodding her head there.
Yeah, I think Stuart might have got a bit confused when I mentioned Claridge's as a business. I didn't actually mean that they should have the right to turn someone away. I just wanted to clarify that. I don't think they should be allowed to, whether it's their business or not, to be honest. That's what I meant. It is completely wrong, and like you said, you do see the back of your head. I remember the very, very first time I saw it, it was a relative. They'd done it, and I was like, what's going on? And my family had to explain what was going on, and that was it. And it was just a non-event then, and it should be a non-event now. I don't see what the problem is.
Anybody else want to jump in on this?
Jim's nodding.
Jim, you look like
No.
you're trying
I'm still enjoying Stuart's fake fury and
I
thinking
can
that.
assure you it's not fake. I'm quite disgusted.
Well, perhaps it's not in your head, but that's the way I see it.
Imagine yourself as a woman having to breastfeed. Put yourself in that situation, how would you feel? I know it's obviously a bit different, obviously because you're male, but imagine you are in that position.
Our society ordinarily does not expect women to be going about exhibiting their breasts.
Why is it allowed? Why?
But they're not exhibiting their breasts. They're not. They're completely covered anyway.
So yeah, can I just add, why is it allowed on beaches then? Why are women allowed to go topless on beaches? Why do women walk around with hardly any clothes on? That to me is more revealing than breastfeeding, and that is more in the public eye.
I think we're making more of this than it deserves.
It's not. I mean,
Jim,
if you've
I think
got
you
a
need to
public
get into the 21st century. I think it's best we don't pander to the older generation and we sort of accept what is now becoming the norm.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Sorry, if we could
I think we should think about it.
Sorry,
Children's as
one
well.
moment. If we could just hear back from Jim, please.
I was a little bit disappointed to hear Aodhan's angle. We're all members of this society, both younger people, middling people, and not so young people. We're all here, and social norms do evolve over the years. And that means that some sections of our society are not going to necessarily see things in quite the same light as others. I think we all need to be a bit more generous to each other and understand what's going on in each other's minds.
So we're going to come back to our audience. The lady here, if we get a microphone over, please.
Hi Jim, I understand you said that social norms are changing and there's difference between the older generations and younger generations, but from your perspective, seems to be just from the older generation, it seems like you don't want to come down to the 21st century, you just want to stay where you are, which is really, really bad considering you're saying we should actually, you know, be generous to each other. You're not actually being generous, are you? You're actually staying with your own ideology, you're not changing anything whatsoever.
Well, UKIP,
it's nothing to do with UKIP policy. There's no such policy around. There is no such policy, so let's go there. I'm expressing my personal feelings about this. You seem to demand, or at least my understanding of what you were saying is, you seem to demand that somebody who is not as young as most people in this room, that I have to change. I don't see that. I respect the fact that there are other people who perceive things differently to myself, but that I don't sense any obligation on my part to have to change my opinion just because somebody else has a different opinion.
But with that argument, you're sort of asking young people and the younger generation to change themselves in order to not offend the older generation.
You're creating...
I'm just using the words you're saying. I'm just using the argument and flipping it back on its head again towards you.
Nonsense. I'm not asking anybody else to change their views about this. I'm expressing the view that my view.
Terry, you look like you wanted to say something a bit earlier.
No, I was just defending what Aodhan was saying. So that's it.
Fine. Good. We have a variety of views. That's great.
Okay. I think we'll be moving on to our next question now, and this will be before we hear a question from the audience. So it's time to talk about politics in general, and our question on this topic is: a recent report has suggested that students could be the key as to who wins at the next general election in Canterbury. Are students going to decide who forms the next government, and why are so many young people disengaged from politics? And I think we'll jump to one of our current students, and we'll hear from Terry first.
A lot of students disengage in politics because they feel like their voice are not held in the Parliament in the United Kingdom's politics as well. That's the reason why they get discouraged in terms of voting, getting involved, or elected new members. So I think the United Kingdom, or the politics in general, should get more students involved into politics, so students can feel that they are raising their voice into politics.
Aodhan as our other fellow student on this panel.
Well, I think students are disengaged with politics because politics is disengaged with students. I think the fact that politicians are now concentrating on non-issues such as immigration, particularly being led by Ukip and pandering to them, they're not listening to the actual population, they're not listening to students or young people as a whole, so they're not addressing the issues that actually matter to them. So why should they even care about politics if politics doesn't care about them?
If we could hand straight over to Jeremy on this one next.
In terms of the Canterbury constituency, I think students could make a massive difference to the outcome of the general election. And between Canterbury Christchurch University, University of Kent, University of Creative Arts, and obviously the older students at Canterbury College as well, that is a fair chunk of the population. And when turnout's often not very much above 60%, that could make a massive difference. And I think it's very much the same in a number of other university cities. As to why students are disengaged, when I was a student, I was fairly engaged. I was elected to the City Council in my second year of university, and I know that I'm very much an exception rather than the rule in that sense. But I think that young people are very much like the population as a whole, that there is a sort of an element of fatigue, that with the economic crisis now that's been dragging on since 2008, it very much has been, you know, the economy, same old story since 2008. And I think that it may be entirely unavoidable that is going to still be the big issue, and it's not one that people feel that the politicians can directly influence them in an immediate fashion. Whether or not that's correct in factual terms, I do believe that's the perception. But I'm hoping that as the economy improves and there's a more of a diverse range of political debate going on, people, and younger people in particular, might feel a bit more involved and feel that the politicians are reflecting the issues that they care about.
Petra. Sorry, before we go, just going to hear from Rachel.
Just basic. It's going to start off with the obvious, that politics is actually a boring subject. A lot of people feel engaged. Obviously, I'm here. I'm interested in politics. I haven't got a political background from my family whatsoever. I did study politics slightly when I was doing my HND here, and I got engaged then, but I didn't know how to progress it. If it wasn't through my trade union activities, I wouldn't know how to. My trade union has actually encouraged me and helped me work my way into politics, and they're doing a lot for young people across the board in all trade unions, not just the one I represent. Young people are disengaged because, like Aodhan said, it's just not out there for them. And if you look at the stereotypical makeup of the House of Parliament, it's mainly men, it's mainly those middle-aged and the older people that are actually there. That's what people see as politics. There is nobody necessarily there to represent the young people, and if there is, it's not in the media enough. And I welcome the fact that Labour Party are thinking and considering about having 16 to 18-year-olds voting, because that can make a huge difference, and students 16 age should be allowed to vote, I think, as well. 100% for that.
Stuart, you're a prospective parliamentary candidate. Hasn't that been the Green Party's policy for a while, votes for 16 to 18-year-olds?
Absolutely, and I'm very pleased that Labour are supporting us in that, so well done Labour. And I think, you know, having spoken to hundreds of 16 and 17-year-olds over the years, and even having my daughter talking in Parliament about 10 years ago exactly on this subject, campaigning for this, you know, I'm very proud to support that. I think, going back to the original question around students in Canterbury, they are going to be absolutely decisive in the parliamentary election here, and clearly the idea that they're disengaged in politics is frankly bizarre. I mean, I came up to the Freshers' Fair, the Green Party Society here had a queue constantly through the two-day event of people wanting to talk. And on the odd occasion that the queue disappeared, I shouted out, "Who wants to pay student fees?" And all of a sudden, it engaged people in a way that, you know, if you're not interested in politics, why do you have a problem paying student fees? And we got a really good dialogue going, and people started to engage with us in a way that was really exciting. So there is a very easy way of engaging and ensuring that students and younger people in general are engaged in politics. We have to engage them. They rightly should be engaged. Frankly, politics is about the future, and younger people are exactly the future. So we must engage with them, and we must ensure that their voice is heard.
Jim, we have a question from the gallery. They're wanting to know how you feel about the presence of Ukip within the student population and whether you think it's considerable or not.
Considerable, I wouldn't say that we've got a considerable support here, but there are some, and they are already working with us, which is very, very welcome. And exciting things might emerge just after Christmas as a result of that engagement. The question asked, were the students key to the election in Canterbury? And of course, if students coming to Canterbury have not registered for the vote, no, they're not, because they're not going to be able to vote. So the practical thing that I hope all hearing this programme are going to think about is, are they on the electoral register? And if not, get on the register so that they can vote. I see my colleagues nodding. I mean, it's the same for all of us. A supporter is useless if they haven't got registered.
Ask you not to bang the table, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Through on the microphone.
Right.
Sorry,
the passion behind your answer.
You're welcome to finish your point.
I wanted to be emphatic about that, and I think I've done it, haven't I, by banging on the table. So registration is absolutely key to participating in the election, and that's essential. A secondary point has been raised, which I'd like to say something about, and that is young people, by which I mean 16, 17-year-olds, having the vote. I think it's a great idea, and it's based on, in my mind, on the rationale that people are living much longer. To rebalance the electorate with, because we have so many people living longer, it's absolutely appropriate that the electorate should be rebalanced by having more younger voices engaged in the business of making decisions about their futures. So I'm absolutely for the 16 and 17-year-olds having the vote.
Aodhan, as we said, you're a student on our panel. Do you want to jump in on this, 16, 17-year-olds?
Yeah, I think a key sort of example of this was when we looked at Scotland in the referendum only last year. Or this year rather, I think, they had the 16-year-old vote for this particular issue, and it really engaged and set a fire under young people. And I think it's something we should look to in terms of using that as an example and using that as a lesson in order to engage young people. This is a really highly contentious issue, one which grabbed all members of the society and the population as a whole. So I think if we can just grab onto that and use that as an example and try and inject it a little bit more into Kent as a whole, not just Canterbury, but in Kent as a whole, particularly in places like Medway, Chatham, Gillingham, those sort of things, where population isn't exactly that politically minded, where in university, in Canterbury, they're a bit more politically minded than they would be in other areas.
Thank you, Aodhan. We do actually have a question from the studio audience.
Okay, I understand you all want 16 to 17-year-olds voting and you want people to actually sign up to the electoral roll. But my question is, in doing all of that, how do you expect to engage them if that's all you want to do? But how do you then get them to actually vote for you if you can't actually engage them in the first place?
Thank you. Jeremy, how do we get 16 to 17-year-olds to engage in politics?
Well, that is a good question. Obviously, on the part of political parties, obviously one place to start would be greater involvement in sixth form colleges and secondary schools and engaging them at that younger age, because certainly from my perspective, my first real engagement as a sort of young adult with politics wasn't until I came to university. We don't have the same culture of student societies and particularly politically involved student societies in a lot of our secondary schools and sixth form colleges that we would have in the university. So I think that would be a good place to start. And I think that by publicising the British Youth Parliament more, you very rarely hear about the British Youth Parliament. Yet it exists and they do a lot of good work. People are very engaged with it, very involved, and yet you barely hear anything about it. So I think better publicising the work they do and trying to get more people involved in that would probably be a good place to start.
We have another question actually from the studio audience.
I'm also a student at Kent, and obviously I don't fit the normal criteria at 44. But I think what we're perhaps missing is it's not just student and young people that are disengaged. The whole British public are disengaged with politics, because I kind of think, and I'm not going to UKIP bash at this point, immigration has come into the into the fray. Everyone's talking about it. David Cameron suddenly has an opinion on it, and I'm sure Mr. Miliband, who's a closet Tory, will do as well. And that is my problem with the parties that we are left with in modern politics, is they're all so similar. There is very little between any of them, and so we've lost real politics, we've lost real debate. It's all about they all went to the same schools, they all behaved the same, and actually we now want something a bit different. And that's why people don't vote, because in Scotland, when there was a decent issue, the polls, they were 80% or more. People actually cared about that, and at the moment, between Ed and David, there's no difference. People won't vote.
Rachel,
sorry, long question.
It's okay. Rachel, do you share the same view as your leader? Is he a closet Tory?
No, to be honest. I do agree that politics at the moment, people are seeing all the main parties is exactly the same, except for UKIP. That is why they're getting anywhere.
Thank you, Rachel.
But that's not a good thing, by the way. It's because they stand out as different. And
yes.
If you remember back into the 30s and 40s, Hitler was different. And look what happened when he got into power.
Okay,
what about, sorry, can we just interject there? What about the Green Party?
Are they different?
To be honest, I'm not 100% on what the Green Party's policies are. I will be honest there.
You're not alone.
Okay, well, Stuart, do you want to clarify those policies?
How
can the Green Party engage with students?
I think that's an easier question, really, rather than going through the vast array of policies that, frankly, are very much based around people and planet. They're socialist, they're environmental. You know, I'm an eco-socialist. And I'm happy to chat with you for a long time afterwards. In terms of engaging younger people in politics, as I say, I was up here during the Freshers' Fair. I've been up here quite a lot. I've been on Canterbury High Street. I've knocked on thousands of doors. And frankly, people are very engaged when you go out to speak to them. The idea that immigration has been a sort of trumped up central issue that, frankly, I think you've described it as relevant. I might have misunderstood. I was helping out in the Rochester by-election, which clearly the press put forward immigration as the central issue. And we went with a very, very different view on it. And I did the same on Canterbury High Street this weekend. We started engaging people to say, actually, the immigrants are not to blame for the economy and low wages. I think you'll find that was the bankers. You know, we've got 2 million Brits living in the EU. There is a right to work and live abroad. Do you want to give up that right, or do you want us to share equally in the benefits of people moving between places? And you get a phenomenally good conversation. People want to be engaged on the positive side of migration. And I think, you know, once we start engaging in a positive view of things, people suddenly become much more wise to the rhetoric from, frankly, obviously UKIP, but also the other three parties that feels very much immigrant bashing. They're not the problem. The problem is the bankers. The problem is the economy.
If we can move away from immigration for a moment, please, and go back to our topic, which was students being engaged in politics. Aodhan, you were nodding your head a while ago.
Essentially, I just want to highlight the fact that students have been engaged in Canterbury before. It's not a new issue. We're typically politically disengaged because the government doesn't really listen to us. I think the last time we were really sort of riled up was when we started a petition to the Conservative candidate, Julian Brazier, on the issue of gay marriage, in which we petitioned him to not go attend Parliament, to abstain from the vote rather than go in and vote against it. I think that was the only, or probably the last time, students were really sort of united in against sort of a political issue, a real sort of typical political issue.
Jeremy, do you want to jump in there?
I don't share Julian Brazier's view on that so much. Obviously, he's a Roman Catholic and has very traditional views on that sort of thing, and whereas I'm more of a sort of happy-clappy evangelical Protestant, and therefore I don't necessarily agree with him and his religious grounds.
But he's our MP. He's the one who's representing us in Parliament, and the fact that he doesn't necessarily share the views and is representing us, but he's not sharing the whole views of Canterbury, is typically, well, not typically, it is a shambles.
Yeah, unfortunately you can't represent the views of everyone all of the time, unfortunately.
But it's the majority of the views of Canterbury, I'd say, really do sort of support the issue. We are conservative, but I think it's the students more so, the majority of student population. Just to be clear, not the population of Canterbury as a whole. I think a majority of students would really, and young people would typically sort of vote pro for gay marriage.
So before we move on, do we have any last thoughts from the panellists or from our studio audience here?
There was a bit of a trend in the last few moments of talking about students as it sounded like a student body. And if there was a consensus within the student body, then that had weight. But students are individuals. Electors, voters are individuals capable of individual thought. And can engage with the management of our country as individuals. They don't have to, no one has to, coalesce into a political party. When I turn up to do my cross in the polling station, I'm doing it as Jim Gascoyne. I'm not doing it as some delegate from a group. So it seems to me that we should try and avoid talking about students as though they're all the same. I doubt very much whether students are all the same.
Yeah, no, please go ahead.
I was going to say, when I was younger, I attended local youth centre, which are few and far between now, and they got me onto the Kent Youth County Council. And I found a lot of people that attended the youth centre weren't really interested, some of the people running. However, what I did note was I was campaigning on behalf of getting a skate park and also on bus fares, and that really did engage them. When people spoke in general, they shut off. So going back to the original question, how to get students on side, it is to actually highlight issues that affect them and not just, because some things just don't interest them at all.
I agree.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah. Thank you. As much as we'd like to continue this,
fine,
I'm afraid we do have to move on to our final question, which is in fact going to come from our studio audience. I'm going to hand over to Pablo. Our studio audience today has Nikki in, who'd like to ask a question on mental health. So if you could pass her. Fantastic. And the question is, given that 1 in 4 adults will suffer with a mental health illness, what would you do for cutting waiting lists for treatment? And we wanted to know why you wanted to ask that question.
It's an issue that affects everybody, and the cost to the NHS on antidepressants and obviously the cost to the economy on missed work. And it has a knock-on effect. Obviously, people suffering from dementia, the people that are caring for people with dementia, and also the comorbidity with dementia.
Thank you. Stuart, as an NHS manager, what do you think needs to be done in this area?
I'd rather answer as a Green Party expert on health, actually, rather than an NHS manager. I mean, I think, the waiting lists on mental health and the lack of focus on mental health is frankly appalling. I've got a motion. We're writing our manifesto at the moment. I've written a large portion of it, and one of the key things I put in there was around access targets for mental health care. And I think at the moment we've got an access target of 2 weeks for cancer patients, and I think we ought to have a similar 2-week target for mental health care. It is, as you rightly point out, a huge issue in the country. It's vastly underinvested. We need to put, frankly, I think somewhere around £4 or £5 billion into it as a lump sum to bring it up to deliver what it needs to deliver for the people. And we need to give it the priority and remove the stigma associated with it. It frankly needs to be as important as the majority of our other services. It's got to be tackled.
Jeremy, I'm just wondering if you'd like to add anything to this.
Well, as well as not being an economist, I'm not a massive expert on health either, but I'll do my best. Certainly I agree with the lady in the audience in that mental health isn't in the public consciousness as big an issue as it actually should be. I think that mental illness, the ways it can affect people are every bit as serious as physical illness, and I don't think that we give it the same amount of respect and resources that it deserves. Obviously it's acknowledged, I think, certainly by the main two political parties, and I would imagine by the others as well, that the NHS does need further investment as we go in, and I think that mental health is certainly an area where we do need to concentrate more resources.
Before we move on, we believe Mrs. Gorham had a question she wanted to pose to Jim. If we could get a mic over to her, please. Thank you, Pablo.
Well done, thank you. It's just today, I think it was Stephen Nicol who has said that the NHS would be in dire straits without the migrant workers, as he suggests that 35% of the NHS is actually, its workforce is actually migrant worker. I just wondered what you thought about that, if you had a comment.
The fact that the NHS employs so many migrant workers needs explanation, doesn't it? Why is it that migrant workers flock there for employment? Why is it that long-term residents of the UK are not stepping forward for those jobs? Is it because those jobs are so poorly paid that only those who come from elsewhere where they would earn even less are thrilled to bits to pick up what we look upon as a wage that is unacceptably low? This is perhaps the question we might ask ourselves.
But we have answers for these questions.
Do we?
Yeah, we do.
Who's answering?
We have another comment that, coming from Fran in the audience, please.
Okay, this is both to you, Jim, and Jeremy, because you're the two parties fighting and scrapping over immigration, that out of this 35%, 11% of them are doctors. So I don't think they're on minimum wage. I think it's because we've got a lack of doctors, and as a Western society that can afford to improve our status by bringing in quality employees, I think we should be doing that. And for you to just go down the same old route about people on minimum wage,
mention the words minimum wage.
Low paid workers.
Yes.
And it's embarrassing.
Doctors in this country are paid substantially more than doctors in many other countries in the world. So the fact that people want to come and work here is totally understandable.
Okay, if we can go to Terry now, please. Your views on this?
I just disagree with what Jim was saying, and I agree with what the audience is saying. So I'm not really expert on medical system.
Actually, sorry to interrupt you. Can we just come over this side?
Yeah, sorry, just with the sorry to interrupt, I was going to speak after you finish, but as the gentleman addressed it to me as well, I'm about to go fairly violently off the party line here. I'm not standing for election again in May, so it doesn't matter what I say now, so it's all good. Unfortunately, I don't share, well, not unfortunately, but well, unfortunately for them, perhaps I don't share David Cameron's sort of views on immigration as such. I've got a French surname, a lot of my family are French, a lot of them are Dutch, my GP's from abroad, my consultant for my Crohn's disease at the Canterbury is from abroad. I just don't share the party line on that one.
Is there a particular reason you're not standing for re-election next year?
Yes, ironically, because I'm emigrating from another European Union country.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Well, in terms of
Terry,
in terms of immigrations, yeah, exactly. In terms of immigration, for myself, I would say it will be, or it is a shame for a British citizen to say immigrants coming in this country to steal your job. You cannot say that an immigrant's coming to steal your jobs if you have all the skills and all the opportunities to work, to look for a job, to seek. Life is about fighting, and immigrants cannot come from another country to come to your country to steal your job. So it's a shame for me to say it's a British citizens who claim that.
So coming back to the original question, Rachel, what needs to be done to cut waiting lists for patients with mental health?
I actually quite like this question, so thanks very much. I was really worried what the question was going to be. They definitely 100% need to increase the funding. Just because you cannot see an illness doesn't mean it's not there. And also the stigma that is attached at the moment needs to be eradicated. The union I'm with at the moment are doing a lot of work around mental health, and I myself actually suffered mental health even though it wasn't diagnosed. When I did go and finally got an appointment, they were trying to rush me out the door and send me to a private person. And I just can't afford it, and it brings me on to I don't think they should privatise the NHS. It's there for a reason. It was brought in and it works effectively.
Your party wants to privatise it?
Yeah, my personal views on it is it shouldn't, and I think you can actually opt to not have private treatment at the NHS if you fill in a form. So I've been told, that's what I was led to believe, and I've been told. I know a lot of people have actually been suicidal because of the low wages they're on, the way they're treated. Depression is getting to them, and it's hard to see. And that I was one of these people that was once suicidal. I had the police come in trying to look for me, went into my workplace to find out what was going on.
So
and
sorry
I have
to cut you short on this one. If we could just bring Aodhan in, we're running out of time.
Yeah, mental health is quickly becoming a very vast and well discussed issue at the moment. And the real thing, I think, the way to tackle this this queue that we're now facing is we're encouraging now doctors about £50 and every time they diagnose a dementia patient. Why don't we just use that money, take that money and use that towards emergency services for mental health patients and people with mental illnesses instead, and let the doctors actually do their job in diagnosing dementia as they should be. They shouldn't be encouraged to or even have any sort of incentive to diagnose one illness over another.
Sorry to
so why can't we use
you.
that money to go towards
if I can just interject
and
ask you to continue, and then we'll go straight on.
I can't remember where I got to now. I was right on the edge of police going into the workplace to find out what was going on with me. I wasn't very good at opening up, which a lot of people that come under mental health just don't do, and I know how difficult it is. But there are people out there that will talk. There'll be one person that will randomly come along you can just talk to, open up. It does help. But it shouldn't necessarily be down to people outside of it. The NHS service should be there to help people. Yeah. I
know, Stuart, you wanted to add something.
I just wanted to say, in terms of Jim's comments on health workers flooding to this country, frankly, that's complete rubbish. The NHS goes out and recruits abroad because there aren't the governments of Labour, Lib Dem and the Tories are not training enough staff to provide the services. Therefore, hospitals, mental health trusts, community trusts go out and recruit abroad. I would welcome anyone from any country working here, but the NHS has to proactively go out and take staff from elsewhere, simply because the current government and the last government failed to train enough staff.
I'm really sorry, I know people want to add into this, but I'm afraid that's all we've got time for this month. The third degree will be back in late January, and you can now apply to be a panellist or be part of the audience by searching for KTV's The Third Degree.
You can also continue the debate and discuss it further using the hashtag KTVTTD.
Thank you for watching. Good night.
Good night.